Welcome to the Rosenfeld Review. I'm Lou Rosenfeld, and I have a special guest today, Amanda Woolley, organizational development consultant, facilitator, and coach with Building 20, based in the northeast of the UK.
That's right. Yep, in Darlington.
Darlington. Okay.
Put it on the map.
Thank you. Thanks for being here today, Amanda. It's great to have you. You are not only an expert in organizational development, which I really want to dig into, because I think a lot of people in the design world are not really familiar with it as a practice, but you're also one of the panelists at the inaugural Advancing Service Design Conference, which is taking place virtually December 3rd and 4th of this year, 2024. You're on really kind of a killer panel with Christian Bazin and Luke Roberts, and it's going to be run by Ben Reason. And folks, if you are wondering what I'm talking about, it's a conference that literally is looking to advance the practice of service design. I've been working with Ben Reason, Patrick Waddlebaum, and Sylvia Bukire for the last 3 or 4 months now, designing, developing, researching a program, and putting it together. Our speakers are now hard at work preparing 8 case studies, and we've got a couple of invited speakers, John Cutler and Jazina Vink, and we've got these 2 great panels to help make sense of each day, and Amanda's part of one of those on the second day. So Amanda, I'm really excited about these kind of areas that pull people in my world of user experience design and research kind of further and further away from the interface, which is what a lot of people in our field have started with. They start with the tangible, but over their careers, they often kind of pan back. I think of service design as like clearly a kind of broader, systems-oriented practice. And I suspect that organizational development is similar in that regard. You're probably dealing more with systems and frameworks and language more than necessarily concrete deliverables and artifacts. But you tell me.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that introduction, and thank you for having me. It's really, really a joy, a pleasure to be here, and I'm really looking forward to that conference as well. Luke is a longish time collaborator of mine. Fantastic to be on the panel with him, and another colleague of mine, John Mortimer. Coincidentally, we didn't know this, is
Right
on the panel the day before. So it's a fantastic lineup. You describe me as an OD expert, which made me smile because for a long time I really rejected the identity of being an OD person, and I was involved in this work, whatever it is, and people would be like, "Oh, it's OD," and I'd go, "Yeah, I'm not really an OD person. I wasn't quite sure what the requirements were for
what kind of person did you see yourself as?
having the late. Well, that's a good question. I suppose I came out of. I got into the practice of this work really from being part of change and transformation. So being part of a transformation program in the health service here in England. And how do you get people to do change? And that was leaning more into strategy, into the tangible, but probably more into service design, although I don't think anybody really used that language, which is interesting to kind of your point, and in this in the aim of that conference about raising people's awareness about service design. What is it we're trying to do here? So we're all kind of in the mix together, trying to get things done, trying to do that in an effective way, understand something about ourselves and other people in it.
Mm-hmm.
And then different practices kind of line up, or we get together with different groups of people and we give ourselves a name. And organizational development kind of works in the space and the community that I'm in, but I'm quite kind of humble about the titles, and that I'm very happy for somebody else to come along and say to me, "Oh, that sounds more like this that you're doing," or maybe in the future we'll make up a different name and draw some different lines around it.
Well,
but
I mean, what do people think an organizational development person does, and what do they actually do, or what do you do at least?
Well, I would love to think that people feel that when they have an issue with how they're working together, that an organizational development practitioner would help with that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a lot of wisdom in thinking that actually the people who really do organizational development are not OD practitioners or consultants. They are the people within an organization,
Mm-hmm.
within a team. They are the people who are creating the norms about how they work, the routines that they use, the different processes that they have, the way things get done. And I would see my role, what I try to do is help people take a step back and look at how they are doing the things that they are doing and reflect on that, to help kind of work through some of the issues that come up.
Mm-hmm.
I quite often talk about, when things get weird, because people are weird.
Mm-hmm.
Workplaces are really weird sometimes. And the work that I do is kind of going, okay, we've all recognized that something is a bit weird here and maybe a bit problematic. So let's sort of stop, take a step back and have some awareness about it, and try and put it back together.
So,
Um,
what kind of weird do you typically encounter?
kind of There's all sorts of different kinds of weird. I mean, I think, going way back in my history, somebody asked me recently about what's the kind of golden thread through your whole life from when you've been a child to now, about like, what is it you're about? And I had to think about it. And my thing was, I think I've just been asking myself the question, if that's what you wanted, why are you doing that since I was about 4? Like if what you're after is that thing, I'm really confused about why you're doing that thing. And we see this, we definitely see this at work. And then what's really weird about it is when we all just sort of go, oh, well, oh, yeah, well, work's weird, oh, yeah, work's annoying, strange office politics, or like, oh, another boring meeting or meeting that shouldn't have existed. And I think there are just some people, and I'm one of them, that goes, no, I refuse to go to a meeting that was a waste of time or was unclear about what we were trying to get out of it. No, we can do this better. There's a sort of sense
So,
that we can get that sorted out. And it seems like, I mean, I'm sure smarter people than me have probably got better taxonomies in this, but that kind of mismatch between your goal, your stated purpose, and how you're getting there,
mm-hmm.
how you think you're getting there. There's a kind of, either what you're saying your purpose is isn't really your purpose, and that could do some work, or how your mental model of how the world works is not the same as mine, so it doesn't seem to make sense what you're trying to do on the assumptions that you made don't line up with what you're trying to get to. So maybe that needs some work, or we need some work together because we've got different kinds of assumptions, and what seems sensible to you doesn't seem sensible to me. And how do we get along with that? So there can be a misunderstanding about purpose, there can be a misunderstanding about the mental models that we're using, or there can be some logic error
Mm-hmm.
about the causation between those two things. And I think any of those kind of factors, as a practitioner, I see myself as filling that sort of skilled helper role
I
that helps
see.
people work through that.
So, it's interesting. You talk a lot about the assumptions that we make, and those are often sort of operationalized as muscle memory. We just keep doing things because we just keep doing them. We keep having that meeting because we always have that meeting on Thursday afternoon. But when you get brought in, or when people who do your kind of consulting get brought in, uh, who brings you in, and what's the trigger? What kind of problems are important enough that someone says, we need an organizational development specialist to help us?
Yeah, well, I think that can be different, and probably, talk about the title of the helper. Is this service design? Is this an organizational development person? Is this a strategy consultant? That kind of depends on who it is in the organization, and a little bit about their tribe. I find that really fascinating. So I've decided, looking at the people around me and the people who know me, I'll say organizational development, and that tends to be your people directors, people function, sometimes people who are involved in strategy or change management because they're familiar with that language. But equally, when people bring in a strategy consultant or management consultant, it's the same kind of impetus, isn't it? Like we have got a mess here that we're not quite sure what to do with it, and we want somebody from the outside to come in and give their perspective. So from my experience, that can happen at multiple different levels. So you might work just with the team, or just with a leadership team, or a particular unit, or it could be, senior leadership team, or the board, or the whole organization. So there are people who are operating at lots of different scales, and a really important part of OD practice is being very aware of what scale that you are operating at. Or if not, scale is a little bit of a funny kind of concept, because actually, just because you're working with a team that is a unit of a bigger organization doesn't mean that team is any less complex than the organization as a whole. So,
and they're all made of individuals ultimately, who have their own complexity. But yeah, I hear what you're saying. I mean, I know your background is in psychology originally, and it's a different thing to get a team on your couch than an individual, and I'm sure an organization really is hard to fit on the couch.
Yeah. Yes. But they're all complex in their own way. And you see the same dynamics coming up again and again and again and again. It's good to not make assumptions about things getting simpler because you've got 3 people in the room versus 100 people in the room. Sometimes working with a really large group. So some of the work that I used to do in transformation in the health service, we really focus on getting large groups of people together around solving problems. And that can sometimes actually be simpler because people align more quickly. They go, oh, well, there's lots of us here. That sort of process just happens naturally among people. Whereas when you only have 3 or 4 people, it's kind of like, oh, I'm going to make my difference known here.
Or you can't hide.
You can't. Yeah.
Right. Well, in those bigger groups too, I imagine there is a risk, though, of the sort of natural alignment not necessarily being a healthy one. It may be similar to the way that the organization is structured, and that might indeed be the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's why you might want to bring an external consultant or group of consultants in to help with those processes to make that space neutral. So a very simple level, when you are hosting a space for people to do work which solve any kind of organizational problem, but say it's respond to a change in the organization, or to design a new service, or to improve something in their service that they're running, that process is going to be best if that space is neutral. It's creative. So how do you encourage people to respond and show up in a way that is creative and future possible, and also that there's a really high sense of ownership from everybody in the room. Now, we sort of come and say that as organizational development people or change people, design people. But when people show up at work every day, the way that our culture of work has developed is like the complete opposite of being that. So there's a sort of bigger process happening, I think, around the community of organizational development or humanism at work or whatever you want to call it, which is about saying, well, let's not just bring these things in on away days and have post-it parties, but what are we leaving in teams, groups, organizations when we work with them, where actually through that process they're becoming a more human group together in the way that they organize. So it's not that we say, right, pause work as usual. Today, you own this service as much as your employer, and and we're interested in what you say, but get back to work as usual tomorrow and just do as you're told and put your head down. Like, we need to be really careful that isn't what it becomes.
Yeah, you don't want to help.
Work that you do,
right, helicoptering in, and it's the equivalent of teaching a workshop and hoping that something sticks and leaving.
Yeah.
We have to take a quick break, but after the break, I'd love to dig into a little bit of your experience with the National Health Service and how that fits into your path, and I imagine that touches a little bit on service design. So we'll take a quick break, everyone. You're listening to the Rosenfeld Review. We're talking with Amanda Woolley, and we'll be right back. I'm going to give you 5 reasons you should be using the Rosenverse. First one, where else are you going to find 100 events that you can attend for free every year, 2 a week, about product management, product design, and UX design, plus a highly engaged Slack-based community of over 13,000 of your peers. What else are you going to find in the Rosenverse? You'll find hundreds and hundreds of recordings of conference presentations and community session recordings, all in one place from a single search browser interface. And behind those hundreds of recordings are hundreds of experts, people who have advanced the field, people who are your peers who are doing interesting new things, all in one place. Why else should you use the Rosenverse? We've been advancing the field of UX since 2005. You're going to find the most advanced content on such topics as design operations and program management, UX research, and a host of other topics, from climate UX to civic design to how designers can work better in product organizations. Lastly, you've been trusting our content since we started back in 2005. Whether it's our books, our conferences, our community sessions, well, we think you're going to trust the way we've brought those all together so that you can spend less time searching and browsing and more time learning and benefiting. I hope you'll try out the Rosenverse, and I hope you'll consider upgrading to a gold paid membership because it brings you a lot more. Not only do you have access to hundreds and hundreds of recorded conference presentations, but you also get access to the Rosenbot, which is a ChatGPT 4 level chatbot that we've been training on all of our content, including our growing collection of nearly 60 books and counting. It's all there, it's all great content, and the Rosenbot is a cutting-edge way to get at it. You can try the gold membership out with a trial for 2 weeks. Give it a try. Hope you like it. Welcome back to the Rosenfeld Review. Lou Rosenfeld here with Amanda Woolley, organizational development consultant, facilitator, and coach with Building 20, and a panelist at Advancing Service Design. We're going to be hearing from her and her fellow panelists, Christian Bazin and Luke Roberts, toward the end of the day on December 4th at the conference. But I'm looking kind of ahead here, and I'm getting ahead of myself because I'd like to go back to you and what you were doing before you became a consultant and when you were at the National Health Service in the UK, which seems to be a sort of proving ground or I don't know, a place where a lot of interesting people apply systems level practices to improving people's lives, whether it's service design or organizational development or other systems level approaches. So, can you tell us a little bit about your experience there and how it contributed to what you're doing today?
Yeah, I mean, I think, my experience begins before I start working there, right? Because I am a British person using the health service, and grateful for it always, when I need it. But, there are real systemic issues with healthcare internationally, not just here in the UK, health inequalities, and that's something that I experienced. My mum, when I was growing up, was very ill, and I had a lot of really poor experiences in dealing with that. Being people making decisions for my family and me that shouldn't have been done. As a young carer, I mean, nobody talked about young carers
Hmm.
when I was a child, but and it took me till, I was in my 30s before I realized that that's what I was. But dealing with risk in services by asking a child to take on more responsibility than they should be, these sorts of things, they this was part of my experience, and that's part of my journey through improvement, change, transformation, and the way that it needs to happen. So I often say to people, my best experiences of healthcare are when people have broken the rules. The times when I've really felt cared for, when I've really come away from it going, that nurse was wonderful, that experience was fantastic, is because they go, oh yeah, we'll bend the rules a bit. That's not really the process, but we can see it's the right thing right
Hmm.
now.
And
It's
they
the
put
right thing
themselves at
right.
risk when they do that.
They put themselves at risk, exactly. And I think that's a real indictment of our service design, or our service undesign, because the norm has been for it to not be designed. They just kind of emerge, don't
Hmm.
they? And then sort of thought about it. And that's slowly changing. We've got improvement communities and the sort of improvement movement, and I think service design is becoming more of that you could plan this in advance, more it being more than just like, well, this is where we're going to put these different professionals, and it will be open from this hour till this, but actually think like, what is the journey of somebody experiencing a need and getting the help that we have to offer, and how can we think more systemically about that and more holistically about that. And I think it's great that we're doing that, but there's still a real need to do it. So I mean, I fell into working in the NHS, and initially was working very much in performance management, which was a right laugh. When you're with my background, going, I don't really know why you think this is going to get the outcome that you wanted
Hmm.
to. Very quickly got into a transformation program with this idea of the people who are working in these services, they know the answers. The wisdom is in that system about what is working and what isn't. And if we could just help the communication between those different people, then amazing things will happen. And we had a fantastic program. I was part of something called the elective care transformation program, and we did a lot of different improvement and transformation projects with different teams of people all around a particular disease area, including people with lived experience. So get all of those different services together. You know, you get your GP, your family doctor, you get the hospital team, you get the community team, you get the therapist, people with lived experience outside of healthcare. So social care here is a big part of the picture. Get people in the room and go, well, actually, how is this working? And use, you know, a lot of the tools and techniques that your listeners will be aware of, and others to build that ownership, that neutrality, that creativity. And those teams came up with fantastic interventions, some of which were so amazingly simple. My favorite one was a team who reduced their emergency readmission rate on their ward by about 30%, because they bought the nurse in the hospital, they bought her a mobile phone, so the community team could contact her and she could join their multidisciplinary conversations that they had. So before, she was on the ward and, you know, there were landline phones, but she wasn't necessarily reachable. Now it's just communication. I know who the team is. They've got my phone number. Instead of filling in forms and processes and following flow charts, they've got an issue with somebody who's at home. They just call up.
That's wonderful.
I know so-and-so got discharged a week ago and they're just having this now. What do you reckon?
Sometimes it's that simple, but it's not.
Sometimes it's that simple.
Maybe the fix is simple, but the work to figure that out, that's the work.
It's relationships. It's the relationships.
Well, that's fantastic. I love that story, and it kind of it's one of the reasons I find service design so exciting, and now organizational development. I really appreciate your sharing and enlightening us about, certainly at a big picture level. That's quite a gift for our listeners. And speaking of gifts, before we wrap up, in fine Rosenfeld Review tradition, did you bring us one?
Of course, I brought you a gift. I would like to offer your listeners the gift of going and checking out a really fantastic book called Tomorrow Mind by Martin Seligman, who is one of the fathers of positive psychology. We call it sort of human potential, and Gabriella Rosenkellerman, who I think is the Chief Innovation Officer at BetterUp. It's a fantastic survey review of the psychological science at work. And also they've done lots of original research that fills in some of the gaps they've got a fantastic research resource because of all the clients that BetterUp have around the world. And it's about what do workplaces and people in workplaces need in the world now when things are so volatile. Things are becoming complex. They call it the whitewater world of work. But, you know, we talk a lot about complex environments and responding to complexity that is so much more prevalent now. And they offer a really simple model around the need for prospection, so forward planning, resilience, and offer quite a nice kind of resilience can sometimes be a bit of a problem in my mind when it means like just keep going, and I don't think it really does mean that. And they have a really nice review of what real resilience can be and our capacity for that, innovation or creativity, social connectedness, which is so important at work, and then my favorite, I think is really important, is mattering, because we only do stuff because it matters and it's really important to us. So if we lose sight of what matters, then that's where all that's when it gets weird, Lou. That's when it gets weird. And that's what we're I think organizational design, service design, it's trying to redirect people's attention back to what matters, and help them to orientate themselves around that, and then do all the other worky stuff.
That sounds like a fantastic read. People bring gifts like books to our podcast all the time, and they always sound really good, but I actually might follow up and read that one because that sounds pretty amazing. And thank you for that, and thank you for joining us. This was really wonderful. I'm really looking forward to your participation in one of those two great panels at Advancing Service Design, and y'all should be joining us. It's December 3rd and 4th. It's virtual. If you've been to one of our conferences, you know we do virtual really well, and I'm looking forward to learning more then. And we'll see you then, Amanda. Thanks again.
Thank you very much, Lou. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the Rosenfeld Review, brought to you by Rosenfeld Media. If you like our show, please subscribe and review it on iTunes, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast platform. I'd love it if you tell a friend to have a listen, and check out our website for over 100 podcasts with other interesting people. You'll find them all at rosenfeldreview.com.